Hey everyone, it's Bob Crossan for Water World and Wastewater Digest. I am joined today by Joanne Jackson. She is the One Water Practice Leader for Black Veatch. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're here at the Water Reuse Symposium 2023 in Atlanta and talking about water reuse as it stands across the nation. And you have some information on the Florida side of things. Could you talk a little bit about what's going on in Florida with water reuse?
Yes, I am based in Florida. Florida actually has a long history in water reuse. We like to claim we're number one, but if not number one, we're amongst the top water reuse states in the United States. But it's a little different than the other states that are at the top, like you think of California and Texas, where their reuse has been driven based on drought and the need for drinking water. And Florida, the driver, initially at least, was effluent disposal.
Okay.
So a need to provide advanced levels of treatment. Utilities found it more cost effective to go to reuse rather than providing advanced levels of treatment. So that really drove it in the early years, which was the 80s through the 90s. Right now, over half of the wastewater produced in the state is reused, but it's primarily for what we call public access reuse, the purple pipe reuse, where it's irrigating lawns and landscapes. But we're seeing that change now. We've recognized that it's hard for people to imagine when you fly over Florida and all you see is water. We're a peninsula, water's everywhere, but we have recognized that there's a limit to our fresh groundwater sources. So we're seeing water supply being a more prevalent driver, and also seeing this shift to indirect and direct potable reuse. There's still a big effluent disposal driver though. The legislature in 2021 passed what we call Senate Bill 64, which is a bill that calls for the elimination of all non-beneficial surface water discharges. So that half of the wastewater that's not reused now, there's going to be a bigger push to find more beneficial uses for that. So got these combined drivers, so we're anticipating seeing a lot more reuse in the coming years.
So what are some of the barriers that Florida's running into when it comes to those those regulations and whatnot as well?
The biggest barrier is Florida has had regulations in place since the late 1980s, early 1990s, and they included indirect potable reuse, but they really hadn't been used. There's been just one project permitted under that rule, and it never went to construction just because of cost, and there's nothing for direct potable. So as we see this shift into more these indirect and direct potable reuse, we don't have the regulations in place. So draft regulations are underway. DEP started in late 2020, and they're still working on drafts. They hope to have something this year, but that's an impediment for projects that we're working on at Black Veatch, is not having this clear regulatory pathway. And I think a lot of utilities I talk to are waiting, like they're thinking, we want to do this in the future, but we need to see where the regulations are going to land. The other barrier is always cost. I mean, these alternatives are not inexpensive, so that's always going to be in there.
Are there any technological barriers involved, or is it mostly just that cost structure and having that certainty that people are looking for?
I think the technology, we've got that down. We've had, thanks to California and all the work that's been done there with the Orange County groundwater replenishment system and other facilities there, we've got some tried and true technology, so I don't really see that as a barrier.
Okay. And then from a One Water perspective, I feel like reuse fits so perfectly into this world of One Water and that mindset. Could you talk a little bit about One Water in Florida? What are people thinking about there, and how is water reuse a part of that plan?
One Water is definitely a plan. I mean, reuse is definitely a part of One Water planning. Water's everywhere in Florida, so One Water planning encompasses the whole water cycle. We're completing a One Water plan now for the city of Winter Haven. That's they sit at the top of the kind of a hill for Florida, which isn't that high, but all the water that falls there runs downstream, and so they're really looking at capturing all the water that they have, allowing it to recharge the aquifers, creating wetlands, and just making the best use of all the water that they have, including from rainfall to wastewater, and doing the full gamut.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you speaking with me about all these subjects. And
well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and for everyone who's watching, check out our video description below. We'll have some resources on water reuse as well as some resources about One Water, so you can learn a little bit more about those. And thank you once more.
Okay, thank you.